The Hartley estate was a symbol of power, wealth, and influence. Every employee knew their place, and no one dared question the billionaire who owned it all. For 4 years, Miriam Johnson had worked tirelessly as a housekeeper, keeping every room spotless while quietly carrying the weight of her own struggles. Despite her loyalty and dedication, she hadn't received a paycheck in 6 long weeks. At home, unpaid bills piled up, the refrigerator grew emptier each day, and every night she pretended everything was fine for the sake of her 12-year-old daughter, Zara. But Zara saw through every forced smile and every silent tear. She watched her mother skip meals so she could eat, heard whispered phone calls about overdue rent, and realized no one inside the mansion was going to fight for her mother. So on a chilly Monday morning, Zara put on her neatly pressed second-hand school blazer, took a deep breath, and walked into the Hartley estate with a determination far beyond her years. Ignoring the shocked expressions of the staff and the desperate calls to stop, she made her way straight to the billionaire's private study. Inside, Edmund Hartley sat behind a massive mahogany desk, discussing a multi-million-dollar business deal over the phone. Without a moment of hesitation, Zara stepped into the center of the room, looked directly into his eyes, and spoke with a calm confidence that instantly silenced everyone present. "Mr. Hartley, my mother has worked honestly for you, but she hasn't been paid in 6 weeks. Pay her today, and I'll tell you how to save your son." The phone slowly slipped away from Edmund's ear. For the first time in decades, a child had interrupted him without fear and somehow spoke as if she possessed the one answer that the world's most expensive doctors had failed to find. The room fell into complete silence as every pair of eyes turned toward the fearless 12-year-old girl, waiting to see what the billionaire would do next. Edmund Hartley slowly placed his phone on the desk, his sharp eyes never leaving the fearless 12-year-old standing before him. Throughout his 61 years, he had negotiated with presidents, defeated ruthless competitors, and built an empire from nothing, but never had a child dared to interrupt him with such confidence. Before anyone else could speak, Gerald Fitch, the estate manager, stepped forward in anger. "Zara, this is completely inappropriate. Leave this office immediately," he demanded. But Zara didn't even look at him. Her attention remained fixed on the billionaire. Seconds later, Miriam rushed into the study, breathless and terrified. She grabbed Zara's arm, apologizing repeatedly for her daughter's behavior, but Zara gently pulled away. "Mom, please trust me," she said softly. "I've already handled it." The room fell silent again. Edmund leaned back in his chair, studying the young girl's calm expression. There was no fear in her eyes, only certainty. Finally, he broke the silence. "You said you could save my son," he said in a measured voice. "Every specialist, every hospital, and every expert has failed. Why should I believe a 12-year-old girl?" Zara answered without hesitation. "Because everyone has been treating Noah's illness, but no one has tried to understand what caused it." Those words struck the room like lightning. Even Gerald stopped speaking. But Zara wasn't finished. "Before I tell you anything about your son," she continued firmly, "I want my mother to receive every dollar she has earned. 6 weeks of unpaid wages. Today, not tomorrow, not next week, today." For a long moment, nobody moved. Edmund stared at the young girl, realizing she wasn't asking for charity or sympathy, she was demanding justice. At that exact moment, the office door opened again, and Edmund's wife, Vivian Hartley, stepped inside. After hearing everything, she looked at her husband and quietly said, "She's right, Edmund. Miriam has served this family with loyalty for years. Paying what we owe her isn't a favor. It's our responsibility." Edmund turned toward the window, his thoughts racing. For the first time in years, Someone had forced him to question not only his business decisions, but the kind of man he had become. His silence inside the study felt heavier than ever. As Edmund Hartley stood by the floor-to-ceiling window, staring across the vast gardens of his estate, finally, without turning round, he asked one simple question. Why hasn't Miriam been paid? Gerald nervously cleared his throat before explaining that most of the household budget had been redirected to cover Noah's expensive medical treatments, creating a temporary shortage of funds. Before he could finish, Vivian interrupted with disappointment in her voice. Temporary. It's been 6 weeks. Edmund slowly turned back toward the room, his expression colder than anyone had ever seen. Call the accounts manager immediately, he ordered. Miriam Johnson will receive every dollar she's owed today. Not tomorrow. Not by the end of the week. Today. Gerald quickly nodded and hurried out of the office. Tears filled Miriam's eyes as she struggled to thank her employer, but Zara simply reached over, gently squeezed her mother's hand, and smiled, knowing justice had finally been served. Then she faced Edmund once again. Now, she said calmly, it's time we talk about Noah. The billionaire folded his arms and studied her carefully. You're very confident for someone your age, he said. Zara met his gaze without hesitation. I'm not confident about everything, she replied. I'm only confident about Noah because I've been watching him for weeks. The answer caught Edmund completely off guard. Then tell me what's wrong with him, he demanded. Zara slowly shook her head. No, I need to show you instead. Take me to his room. For a brief moment, the billionaire almost smiled. There was something extraordinary about this young girl. She wasn't trying to impress anyone or prove she was clever, she simply believed she was right. After putting on his jacket, Edmund led the way upstairs, followed by Vivian, Miriam, and the rest of the household staff. None of them realized that within the next few minutes, a 12-year-old girl was about to uncover a truth that dozens of world-class doctors had completely overlooked. Noah's bedroom was tucked away at the far end of the mansion's east wing, where the curtains remained half-closed and the air carried the scent of medicine instead of childhood. Shelves that should have held toys were crowded with prescription bottles, medical reports, and untouched meals. The 10-year-old boy lay quietly against his pillows, looking pale and exhausted, exactly as every doctor had described him. But the moment Zara stepped into the room, she noticed something no one else did. For the briefest second, Noah's tired eyes lit up with curiosity before he quickly returned to the weak, lifeless expression everyone expected to see. Edmund introduced Zara, explaining that she was Miriam's daughter and wanted to spend a few minutes with him. Noah nodded politely, but Zara immediately sensed that he wasn't acting naturally with so many adults watching. She turned toward Edmund and spoke without hesitation. I need to talk to Noah alone. The request shocked everyone. Edmund instantly refused, but Zara calmly replied, Leave the door open if you want. Just give us 5 minutes. After a long pause, Noah quietly looked at his father and whispered, It's okay. I'd like to talk to her. Reluctantly, Edmund, Vivian, and Miriam stepped outside, leaving the bedroom door slightly open. As soon as they were alone, Zara didn't ask about hospitals, pain, or medicine like everyone else. Instead, she smiled and asked, Do you like animals? Noah blinked in surprise before admitting he loved dogs and missed the golden retriever his family had lost years earlier. Zara laughed and told him about a scruffy gray cat that visited the mansion's garden every afternoon, confessing she'd been feeding it pieces of bread until she learned cats didn't even eat bread. For the first time in months, a tiny smile appeared on Noah's face. It wasn't forced. It was real. Zara smiled back, knowing she had just discovered something every specialist had completely missed. Noah wasn't responding to medicine because the illness everyone was treating wasn't the illness that had trapped him in the first place. The room became so quiet that even the ticking clock on the wall sounded painfully loud. Vivian gently held Noah's hand and asked the question she had feared for months. Did something happen at school? Noah's fingers tightened around the blanket, and tears slowly filled his eyes. For several seconds, he couldn't speak. Then, in a trembling voice, he whispered, "It wasn't just one thing. It happened over and over again." Edmund felt his heart sink as Noah finally revealed the truth he had buried for months. Two older boys, Leo Crane and Bastian Foyle, had made his life a nightmare. They mocked the way he talked, laughed at him in front of other students, and waited for him after football practice to shove him against lockers, steal his belongings, and threaten him if he ever told anyone. Noah admitted he had stayed silent because both boys came from wealthy, influential families whose parents donated millions to the school. "I knew nobody would believe me," he said, his voice breaking. "Even when a teacher saw what they were doing, he just walked away." Tears rolled down Vivian's face as she realized her son had been carrying this fear completely alone. Noah explained that every Sunday night his stomach would begin to ache, and by Monday morning he genuinely couldn't bring himself to get out of bed. The pain was real, but it wasn't caused by a disease, it was caused by terror. "I wasn't pretending," he cried. "I really felt sick. I just couldn't go back there." Edmund slowly walked to the far side of the room, unable to look anyone in the eye. Every expensive specialist, every medical test, and every hospital visit suddenly felt meaningless. His son had never needed another doctor, he had needed someone to ask the right question. After a long silence, Edmund returned to Noah's bedside, sat beside him, and gently placed a trembling hand on the back of his son's head. "I'm so sorry," he whispered, his voice filled with regret. "You should never have faced this alone." Noah looked up at him with tears in his eyes. "I wanted to tell you, but I thought nobody could stop them." Edmund shook his head firmly and pulled his son into the first real embrace they had shared in years. "Listen to me," he said. "You're never going back to that school until this is fixed. I promise you. No one will ever make you feel unsafe again." At that moment, Noah finally broke down in his father's arms, and everyone in the room realized that the first step toward healing had nothing to do with medicine, it began with being heard. The very next morning, Edmund Hartley did something that surprised everyone in his household. He cancelled every meeting on his calendar, dismissed his driver, and got behind the wheel himself. Instead of heading to one of his corporate offices, he drove straight to Crestfield Preparatory School, determined to uncover the truth with his own eyes. He didn't call ahead or announce his arrival. When he entered the headmaster's office, Daniel Reeve greeted him with a practiced smile, assuming the billionaire wanted another update about Noah's mysterious illness. But Edmund wasted no time. "My son isn't sick anymore," he said calmly. "He's been living in fear." The smile disappeared from the headmaster's face. Edmund leaned forward and asked one direct question. "When did you first learn that Leo Crane and Bastian Foyle were bullying my son?" The room fell silent. After several uncomfortable moments, Reeve finally admitted, "October." Edmund felt a wave of anger rise inside him, but his voice remained frighteningly calm. "October," he repeated. "So you've known for 7 months while my son was lying in bed, seeing doctors, taking medicine, and believing no adult would protect him." The headmaster tried to explain that the situation was complicated. The boys came from powerful families whose generous donations helped fund the school, and any formal action could create serious problems. Edmund's expression hardened. "You're telling me my son's safety was worth less than a donation?" Reeve couldn't answer. The silence said everything. Edmund stood slowly, and looked the headmaster straight in the eyes. "I'm giving this school one opportunity to do the right thing. Launch a full investigation, discipline everyone responsible, and provide written proof of every action you take. If this is buried or ignored again, I won't handle it privately. I'll make sure every parent in this country knows exactly what happened inside these walls." Without another word, he walked out of the office, leaving the headmaster sitting alone with the weight of his own decisions. As Edmund drove away, one painful thought refused to leave his mind. His 10-year-old son had stopped believing adults could protect him long before anyone realized he was crying for help. When Edmund returned to Ashford Manor that evening, he expected to find the same silence that had filled the house for months. Instead, he paused at the kitchen window after hearing something he hadn't heard in a very long time: his son's laughter. Outside in the garden, Noah was sitting on a low stone wall, while Zara crouched in the grass, completely focused on a family of tiny beetles crawling through the flowers. She had given each one a funny name, inventing ridiculous stories that made Noah laugh until he had to hold his stomach. It wasn't the polite smile adults had been celebrating for months. It was real laughter, the carefree laughter of a child who had forgotten, even if only for a moment, that he had been carrying fear for so long. Edmund stood perfectly still, unable to take his eyes off them. Miriam quietly walked into the kitchen and joined him by the window. After watching the children for a few moments, Edmund finally turned toward her. "Mrs. Johnson," he said, "paying your overdue wages wasn't enough. I owe you something far more important." Miriam looked at him with quiet curiosity. "An apology," Edmund continued. "While you worked tirelessly for this family, I failed to notice your struggles. And I failed my own son at the same time." Miriam smiled gently. "Then I'll gladly accept both." Edmund nodded with genuine gratitude. Over the following weeks, the mansion slowly transformed. Noah began eating full meals again, spent less time in bed, and started helping Miriam in the kitchen just because it made him happy. Zara visited every Tuesday and Thursday after school, and instead of talking about hospitals or bullies, they spent hours discussing animals, clouds, football, and the mischievous gray cat that still wandered through the gardens every afternoon. Without realizing it, Noah was healing not because of another prescription, but because someone had finally made him feel safe. Watching from a distance, Edmund understood something that no business success had ever taught him. True healing doesn't happen all at once. It happens in small conversations, quiet moments, and the simple feeling of knowing that someone finally sees you. Spring slowly brought life back to the Hartley family. Weeks after Noah revealed the truth, the mansion no longer felt like a hospital. Every morning he came downstairs for breakfast with more energy than the day before, and each afternoon he and Zara filled the gardens with laughter instead of silence. Edmund made a promise to himself that he would never again let work become more important than his family. Instead of asking Noah, "How are you feeling?" he began asking simple questions like, "What did you dream about last night?" Or "Want to kick a football on after dinner?" Those small conversations slowly rebuilt the trust that fear had stolen. Meanwhile, Vivian quietly reorganized the household, giving Miriam the promotion and respect she had deserved for years. She was officially appointed household director, received a generous salary increase, and was placed in charge of the estate staff. Even Gerald, who had once ignored Miriam's struggles, completely changed his attitude and began treating every employee with kindness and respect. A few weeks later, Crestfield Preparatory School sent an official letter confirming that Leo Crane and Bastian Foyle had been suspended while a full disciplinary investigation moved forward. The teacher who had ignored the bullying was also held accountable, and the school introduced strict anti-bullying policies, anonymous reporting systems, and stronger protections for every student. Edmund read the letter quietly before placing it in his desk drawer. He wasn't interested in revenge, he only wanted to make sure no other child would ever suffer the way Noah had. Then, one warm afternoon in April, Noah surprised everyone by asking, "Dad, would you like to play football outside?" Vivian had to leave the room to hide her tears, while Edmund smiled without saying a word. Father and son walked into the garden together, kicking the ball back and forth beneath the bright afternoon sun. They laughed at every missed pass and every clumsy kick, and with every step, the fear that had haunted Noah for months slowly disappeared. Watching from the kitchen window, Zara smiled quietly, knowing that sometimes the greatest miracles don't happen in hospitals, they happen when a broken family finally learns to listen to one another. A few weeks later, Edmund found Zara sitting alone on the garden wall, quietly watching the familiar gray cat with the torn-ear wander across the lawn. He walked over and sat beside her, not above her as a billionaire, but beside her as a grateful father. "I went back to Crestfield today," he said. "The school has introduced strict anti-bullying policies, anonymous reporting systems, and new rules to protect every child. What happened to Noah should never happen again." Vera smiled softly. "That's exactly what needed to happen," she replied. After a brief silence, Edmund looked at her with genuine respect. "I've spent my entire life believing money could solve almost every problem. But you taught me something no business deal, doctor, or expert ever could." Zara shrugged with a small smile. "You just needed to start listening." Edmund nodded, realizing how true those words were. "I kept asking doctors what was wrong with my son," he admitted. "I never stopped to ask my son what had happened to him." Zara looked toward the house, where Noah's laughter echoed through the open windows. "It's not too late," she said. "The important thing is, you're listening now." As she stood up, she pulled a small piece of chicken from her pocket and gently placed it on the grass for the gray cat before walking toward the mansion. Edmund remained on the garden wall, watching the sunlight spill across the lawn while Noah's joyful voice filled the air. In that peaceful moment, he understood the greatest lesson of his life. Real strength isn't measured by wealth, power, or influence. It is measured by the courage to listen, the humility to admit your mistakes, and the love to protect those who need you most. One fearless 12-year-old girl had not only saved his son, she had saved an entire family from losing each other forever. And from that day forward, Edmund Hartley promised himself that no child in his world would ever have to suffer in silence again. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell for more powerful, life-changing stories. Also, tell us in the comments which moment moved you the most: Zara's courage, Noah's confession, or Edmund's transformation. Your support helps us bring more inspiring stories to life. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you in the next story.